Hi, folks, and welcome to another episode of Careers and Coffee. So, today I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Ian and Shannon, social workers from Norfolk County Council, to talk to us a little bit more about their roles. So, let's bring them on to hear a little bit more about their roles. Folks,
Hello.
welcome. How are we both doing today?
Hi,
Yeah,
I'm
fine,
good,
thank you.
thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, living life to the full, loving it. Now, folks, let's get straight into it. Tell me a little bit more about who you are and what you do. And let's go to Shannon. Let's go to you first.
Yep, hi. So my name's Shannon. I'm a social worker for Norfolk County Council, as you said. I work for Children's Services and I'm in what's called the Family Assessment and Safeguarding team. I've been in this position now for a year and 9 months, to be precise. And yeah, I'm still here. So that's always a good sign.
Happy days. Thanks, Shannon. And Ian, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Ian. I'm a social worker with adult social services, but predominantly mental health, 18 to 65-year-olds. I've been working in mental health for probably similar sort of time to Shannon, really, probably about a year and a half. But I've been working for Norfolk County Council as a social worker for around 2.5 years now.
Awesome. And if you want to become a social worker, what's the process beforehand? And Shannon, I'm going to go to you on that one.
Yeah, so I did my social work degree as a master's level. So I'd already done an undergrad in psychology at that point. And the 2-year kind of master's course that I did is a combination of placements and kind of study time, your tuition time on campus. When I was doing my study, and I think it's the same now, there's a kind of expectation that you would do a placement in adult social services and a placement in children's services. So yeah, that's the kind of route that I went in to get into social work.
Fantastic. And Ian, similar route to you?
Yeah, so when I left school, I was actually an electrician. So I had a totally different career path. But yeah, I started. Well, I went back to college because in order to get into university, you have to have your A levels. So I went and done an access course at college, which gave me my UCAS points to get into university. And then I went through the university route. So I was 3 years at university. Sort of first year you sort of do all full-time campus, and then the second year you do a 70-day placement, and then on your third year you do a 100-day placement. But again, as Shannon stated before, that we were prompted to do a children and an adults placement whilst we were doing our training. So for the 70 days I'd done a children's services, and then for the 100 days I'd done an adults placement. Yeah, and sort of that's for 3 years, and then you then qualify as a social worker. And then in the first year of practice, when you're working in statutory social work, so that's sort of for a local authority, you have to do your ASYE. So that's a year. So it's a year of supported,
assisted and supported year in employment.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so you do that for your first year, and then once you've completed that, so you start as a level 1 social worker, and then you then become a level 2. So in adult mental health, what that means is, so as a level 1 you will do general assessments, but when you qualify as level 2, you can then do more complex assessments such as capacity and bits like that.
Brilliant, thank you. And my next question is, why did you want to do it? Ian, I'll stick with you on that and then go to Shannon.
Yeah, so obviously I qualified as an electrician, and I was working as an electrician, and in my spare time I used to volunteer I volunteered in a local disabled group, and I used to come away from work not wanting to. Well, it's one of those things that you don't really want to go to work, you want to come home again, sort of thing. But then when I was volunteering, it gave me a really good sense of, I really enjoyed it. So I've got a disabled uncle who I worked with and supported, and then he said to me, why don't you follow a career in supporting others? So I went to college and got some careers advice, and that led me through into my access course to become a social worker now. So it's a bit of a change of career.
Definitely. And Shannon, same for you. What made you become a social worker?
So I think part of mine was seeing social work unfold. So I also, like Ian did, volunteering. And I remember I had one day when I was in where there was a social worker there with a young person, and I just remember watching that dynamic unfold and the relationship between them, and I just thought, that sounds like an interesting job to do. And then that made me go away and kind of research into it and look into it a bit more. And I think, like Ian was saying, like that voluntary experience that I had at the time was just really significant for me, and just making me kind of reevaluate that I wanted to do something as a job that was with people and helping people. So yeah, that was my kind of route into getting into social work.
Brilliant, thank you both. And we just got a question. So how did you decide what area of social work you wanted to specialise in, and what areas are there? Shannon, I'll stick with you for that one.
Yeah, so if you'd asked me when I started or when I was studying, I was probably dead set on wanting to go into mental health social work. And I was like, no, I don't want to go and work into children's services. It doesn't feel like it's going to be for me. I thought I'd do my placement and then I'd be finished. Did my 100-day placement in children's services, and I just loved it. I loved working with the young people. And that just confirmed for me, actually, that's where I wanted to be. And that for me, it was the relationship, it was the type of work that we did. It was so varied, it was fun, it was difficult and challenging, but every day just felt really different. In terms of children's services, different areas, so like I said, I'm in the assessment and safeguarding team. There's different areas, as in you can work with young people and children who have been adopted, as a social worker who supports foster carers. You can work in a team that focuses on exploitation. So there's different kind of teams within children's services, working with children with disabilities.
Fantastic, thank you. And we just got another question. So what are some of the very long-term, 10+ years, career goals for working in social work? Who would like to take that one?
Go on, Ian.
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, so I've now been sort of qualified for 2.5 years, and when you qualify in adult mental, well, when you qualify in adult services, especially mental health, there's often there's an option after 2 years to train to become an AMP, so it's an approved mental health practitioner. So an AMP would work under the Mental Health Act and work alongside consultant psychiatrists for people who are mentally unwell or with mental disorder in the community. So I have recently, because I'm now 2.5 years qualified, I've now almost finished my ASYE training. So I'll soon be qualified as an AMP, and that I would then become. So an AMP as an AMP, you become a public authority. So as Norfolk County Council is a public authority, Suffolk County Council is a public authority. If you're an approved mental health practitioner, you are a public authority, and then you then support people in mental distress and determine whether or not they need treatment in hospital, and if not, or treatment in the community. So it's working around that. So that's where I am. Obviously, after 2 years, I'm now training to be an AMP, but sort of other than that, you've got practice consultant roles, you've got management roles, you've got, so as you go through social work, there's the opportunities are there, and you will be promoted and supported to take those opportunities as well. So you have regular personal developmental plans where you then set out what your goals are, and then you would sort of work towards that within your career. Your managers are really often really supportive to help you achieve what your goals are. So.
And I think you can also work, like, so quite often people go into the areas that I mentioned earlier. So you might work in one team for X amount of years and then go into a different team, or you might go from adults to children's or vice versa. So the longer term goals is that you can be really varied with your skills as well from which team you're going to be going into.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the skills are definitely transferable. So you can,
totally.
Yeah. So
excellent. Thank you both. And yeah, do you feel there are any sort of misconceptions around social work before you went into it, that now you've been doing it for 2 years, that you've sort of busted some of those myths? If so, can you tell us what some of those misconceptions were? See Shannon nodding a lot, so I'm going to go straight to her.
Look, I think the big one for children's services is that we remove children, and that's all we do, is that we spend all our days, removing children from their families. And yes, there is an element of that has to happen at times to make sure children are safe. But actually the misconception around that is that that's not largely all that we do at all. And actually what we do is to try and make it so that children and young people can stay with their families safely and have a, lovely, happy family life that you'd hope for everyone. So I think that for me has been the biggest misconception of children's social work specifically.
Excellent. And Ian, what about yourself? Oh, is he frozen?
Yeah, let's come back now.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, what about yourself, Ian?
Yeah, so I think some of the big myths for me of sort of going into adult social care. I suppose initially I did feel quite anxious going into adult mental health. I knew I wanted to work in adult social care. I didn't really know that I wanted to work in adult mental health, and I joined a team called the NIPE team when I went into Norfolk County Council, and the NIPE is for newly Norfolk's Institute for Practice Excellence at the time. So that the NIPE sort of supported you to look into what area you'd like to go into. So that could be learning disabilities, mental health, older persons, hospital discharge, various other roles really. But one of the myths was perhaps that mental health, working with adult mental health, was dangerous, or people, I know it's very risky. And actually working in adult mental health, I've said it a few times. Actually, I really do love my job. It's really rewarding. The people in the community. Often people do have a mental disorder, but they're well. So mental disorder but well, and they're able to manage in the community with some assistance. So I do think it's sort of some of the myths around sort of it being a dangerous role. It potentially at times it may be. Obviously, you can't be complacent, but at the same time, the risks are quite. I do think that it's more stigma than what is it the actual like when you're working in the role. If that makes sense.
Thank you. No, that's brilliant. Thank you both. And just got another question. So, do you believe your undergraduate degree matters when you go into social work? Who would like to take that?
I suppose that's a good question because for me, my undergraduate degree was psychology. So that was really helpful for when I did my social work degree, because a lot of what we did as well was around theory, and that was especially like attachment theory, which was something that I did a lot within my psychology degree. But in the same vein, I know lots of workers in my team and other teams who did a very random undergraduate degree that wasn't linked to social work necessarily, but then alongside had different work experience or voluntary experience, or did different training or apprenticeships that kind of enabled that facilitation to go into social work.
Excellent. Thank you. And I suppose next question, over the last 12 months, obviously things have been crazy for everybody. How has social work changed during COVID for you both? I'm going to go with Ian on that one to begin with.
Yeah, so generally for me during COVID, the main thing which has changed is the remote working. So before we'd be in an office with our colleagues and working joint with colleagues. You'd have a lot of support and reflection. You'd have sort of that you have sort of supervision, because you often get that informal supervision with your colleagues and support in the office. But that's the biggest thing what's changed, is that obviously you're quite, at the moment we are isolated, but although we've got communication via obviously online teams and various other bits that we can communicate with each other. But it's just I suppose it's just working from the home environment. But we are still going out on visits. We are still meeting people. We're having regular COVID checks to make sure that obviously we're not carrying any form of COVID. Obviously to protect the people we're working with. But yeah, so generally, I think the main thing is just sort of the lone work, and it's sort of increased. So.
Yeah,
and
it
Shannon,
feels more isolating. Yeah, it definitely we kind of lone work in the sense of our cases are our cases, so there are families or service users that we work with, but the detachment from the team has been the biggest effect that I know myself and other people have noticed. But in terms of the day-to-day working, throughout the whole kind of lockdown, we're still going out doing visits, just obviously wearing PPE, and I suppose the knock-on effect from that is that there has been other agencies that haven't been able to go out to work in the same way. So I think that's led to more stress, more pressure, less support from other agencies around, which has which can feel quite daunting when you know that you're the only person going in and seeing and supporting someone face to face anyway.
Excellent. Thank you both. And another question. So what are the best things about being a social worker? Shannon, I'll stick with you on that one, then I'll go to Ian.
Just every day is so different, and I like that, because I think I get quite bored easily. I get quite restless. So every day will be, you'll never have 2 days the same at all. And it's fun as well. And I know there's parts of it that are stressful and aren't always fun, but my favorite thing, and has always been the best thing for me, has been working with the young people that I get to work with, and that will forever be the bit of it that I love the most, and will keep me being a social worker.
Brilliant. And Ian, what about yourself? We got him.
So yeah, we're back.
Happy day. So same question for yourself, Ian. What are some of the best bits about being a social worker?
Yeah, I think definitely. I totally agree with what Shannon said. It's every day is totally different. You get so much, because at the end of the day, obviously we're supporting people, and we work, and it's it can be really rewarding at times when things go really well. It can be challenging at times when things aren't going quite so well. But I think there's so much support in social work, and I think because it's a social job in that sense, is that everybody who works in social care often are really understanding. Your colleagues are really supportive, and yeah, it's just a really, really, for me, it's a really good place, and it works really well for my sort of personal life, and how it works really well. So sort of you get a good work and family life balance as a social worker.
Fantastic. And for both of you, what are some of the skills that you use day to day in your roles as well? And go to Shannon on that one to start.
Communication skills for sure. That's the biggest one for me, and also your interpersonal skills. That's a huge part of both of our jobs, of working with people, and really having to tailor that to who you're working with. So me working with a 2-year-old will work very differently to a 17-year-old. So the variety within that of having to really fine-tune and develop your skills for different people. Also, organizational skills are really quite important as well. If you've got families or young people that you're working with, that are relying on you for things like visits and certain meetings or deadlines, there is an element of being organized within that to be able to meet those deadlines as well.
And Ian, similarly for yourself, what are some of the skills that you use?
Yeah, definitely communication skills, sort of, like I say, sort of having an understanding. It's generally what Shannon has said, really. It's sort of the main skills I would say are communication, sort of understanding, working with people, because you've really got to be sort of a people sort of orientated person in order to be able to get those effective relationships, develop those relationships with others. And it's really, it's hard for me to think well, because obviously that's one of those things, because obviously when you work in social work, you just do it as each day, don't you? You just do. So
yeah.
So it's hard to sort of really pinpoint what the skills actually are, but I think definitely the biggest one is communication.
Right. That's great. Thank you both. And we've got another question. Very good question. What are your thoughts on income versus personal fulfillment on choosing a career? Shannon, let's go with you on that one.
I think for me, personal fulfillment would win time and time again, because I think you've got to do a job that you love doing, because you'll be doing it for X amount of years, 5 days a week, several hours a day, and you've just got to do something you love, otherwise it's just so hard to do. And I think with social work in particular, it can be a very demanding job of you emotionally, as well, and your heart has to be in it to give it your all. And I think, yes, income and getting paid well for your job is important too, because we all have families, lives of our own, houses and everything, but having a job that you love going to is key, because then you'll do the job well, I think.
Good advice. And Ian, what about yourself?
Yeah, I would definitely say don't go into social work and with the expectation of the income, because obviously it is about fulfillment. Because just reflecting back to when I was an electrician, I used to work with my colleagues, and I used to say to them, do you like your job? And they'd say no, and I'd be like, okay, so what was it about your job you didn't like? You said, well, if I had a choice again, I would do something different. So, and I think it's about really considering your career, because once you're in a career and you're sort of you've got financial, because when you go into career, you've got financial outgoings, bits like that, and it's really hard to then change career, and it's really important to consider the career that you're going to go into, because because for me, I get up in the morning and I'm happy to go to work, and then there's no urgency to get home again. So it's sort of that's the sort of thing you want from a job and a career, that you're not waking up in the morning, you're not wanting to go to work, you're feeling really stressed. And because obviously it's often another thing in social work which often people say is burnout. People will often burn out. Oh, I think it crashed.
No, I can still hear you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. So often in social work, again, it's burnout, and I think burnout can be an area of social work which, if it's not the right role, it will quickly the stress will quickly develop.
It will show.
So
yeah,
you've got to definitely be sure. Yeah,
Great advice. And next question, so how do you find the right balance between therapist and client? Do you ever feel attached to a client, or I suppose in terms of the individual you're working with? Shannon, go to you on that just briefly, because I'm conscious of time.
Yeah, it's hard to get that right at times as well, because for a lot of the young people I work with and children, I've worked with them and I've seen them grow and develop, and seen them go from what's been not very good things in their life to things seemingly a bit better. And I've had lots of young people where they've gone through really awful things in their lives, and I've been sometimes the one stable, constant factor in their life. And you quite often see them several times a week, a day, whatever. You're just really flexible within that, and so it can be hard not to form those attachments. But I think it's just being clear, really, with the young people that you're working with, and yourself, that there is naturally, we are doing a caring job where we care for people. It's hard not to feel some sort of attachment, but it's just being boundaried with having some own personal boundaries within that as well, and just making sure that you're clear with the young people that you're working with, that I will turn my phone off at the end of the day, and I will not be available on the weekends and stuff to work. And you have to set those boundaries as well for yourself as well as the young person.
Excellent. And just Ian, very briefly, your thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously we are all people, so we all have emotions, and I think that we will at times feel a bit attached to a client, or emotional, but I think, like as Shannon said, it's really important to be aware of your own emotions, and sort of, and if it is causing it, if it is something which is perhaps relating to your own personal life, or something which you're struggling to work around, it's really important to talk about that. And that's often what we do. We have regular supervision, so we'll sit down with our managers, talk about how things are going, how we're feeling, and our manager can make those decisions of support if we need to perhaps come away from a case or need further support around a case. So we're
talking to colleagues as well, and I think that's the thing that's changed over lockdown, is you haven't got a colleague next to you to be like, I really need to talk this point through.
Excellent. So this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining Careers and Coffee. I've learned so much. I could talk to you all day just hearing about and seeing how passionate you are about your job. So huge thank you coming on to Careers and Coffee today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
So folks, that was Ian and Shannon talking to us a little bit more about their roles at Norfolk County Council and becoming social workers. I've learned so much just hearing from them. I'm sure you can see all their details below as well, and I can see plenty of questions, so I'm sure we can respond to those as well. So that's the end of Careers and Coffee for this week. Be sure to tune in next week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. We look forward to seeing you. Thanks.